We are in the life of Paul, and we're in chapter 9, where we have Saul of Tarsus, who is on his way to Damascus. We did not get through the whole thing, and I'm just going to reiterate for those who may be watching, is that I will use the names Saul of Tarsus and Paul. I'm going to be switching those up. We're talking about the same person. Paul the Apostle and Saul of Tarsus are the same person. There's no secret in that. There's, as we made mention last week, there's a certain point in time when Luke will switch from referring to him as Saul to Paul. But that won't be until he gets into his missionary journeys where that's going to happen. And but we are, last week we were discussing Paul as being zealous for God, but without knowledge. He was extremely zealous. He thought he was doing the right thing. He was persecuting the church, and it's more than just going to Damascus. And this failed attempt, fortunately it failed, this failed attempt to go to Damascus and bring back Christians to face trial. And this was, as we made mention last week as well, that this isn't just things there in Jerusalem of where we're just going to tighten the vice here in Jerusalem on Christians. You guys leave. You guys get out of here. We want to be free of you. It's more than that. They want to eradicate the entire church. They want to eradicate it. They see it as, or they want to see it as a sect. They want to see it as followers of another cult leader or this blasphemer. They want to set it like that. But they know that's not what it is. They know it's far more than that. That we're dealing with the Christ. This is the church. And they are going. Now someone like Saul of Tarsus, okay, he has been doing these things. He's been persecuting the church with a clear conscience, evidently. But he's about to be shown the truth. And it's Christ that is going to interrupt this visit to Damascus. And last week we were in Acts chapter 9, and we got to verse 26. I'm sorry, verse 6, not 26. We got to verse 6. And we just read this verse. So he, that's Saul of Tarsus, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what do you want me to do? And we talked about that briefly, that obviously he understood Christ wanted something out of him. He wanted something out of him. He knew that to be the case. Otherwise, God would just be rid of him, and that would be that. He knows that there must be a reason that God is doing this. There must be a reason. Then the Lord said to him, Arise and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. This is an oughtness. All right, what do you want me to do? Go into the city, you're going to be told. All right, when you're told, that's directly from me. When you're told, that's what I expect out of you. Okay? Now, we have come to this point, and as we have made mention, we're going to have to switch. Currently, we're going to be switching from Acts chapter 9 to 22 to 26 to get different information. Now let's understand something. The book of Acts is written by Luke. Okay, so chapters 9, 22, and 26 are all written by Luke. Luke gives an account of what occurs in Damascus, like a point by point, this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. In chapter 22, however, he is recording what Paul says about it. And in chapter 26, also what Paul says about it. So we have three different places in the book of Acts. One that where Saul is experiencing it for the first time. And then the next two, chapter 22, 26, where he's telling others. He's telling a mad mob, or he is telling Agrippa and Bernice. He is telling them what occurred. And none of it contradicts. None of it, even though some have tried to find contradictions in it, none of it contradicts. We are revisiting the same event, but looking at each one giving a little bit different details that the one on its own does not carry. And so we go to this we have seen now from chapter 9 everything that Christ told him in chapter 9. But he tells him more than this. Okay, and we're going to go to chapter 22. Chapter 22 is very similar. Chapter 26, he tells him a lot more than this. Okay, this is summing it up. But we get a more full account come chapter 26. Is there anything wrong with that? No, of course not. Of course not. The Bible is meant to be read and studied. Number two, this is also a very powerful way in which something can be reviewed again, but new details being brought in. It is a very interesting literary device if we want to look at it from that standpoint. But I think more than that, much more than that, is that the Bible is meant to be studied. Now, so we see these words in chapter 9. We see first, and this is what direct statements from Christ to Saul of Tarsus. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. It is hard to kick against the goads. And arise and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. So, they are very near Damascus. They're not at the halfway point. They are near Damascus because that's what it says in verse 3. As they journeyed, he came near Damascus. And in my mind, that means, that's within sight. You can actually see the city from this point. I don't know, but it being near would not mean, that they're even at the halfway point, that they are much, much closer. But, so we see these three quotes, direct quotes of Christ to Saul of Tarsus. Now, let's go to chapter 22. And we're going to read what he says about this. So in Acts chapter 22, he is speaking to a crowd that wants him dead. That's kind of important. This is the bravery of Saul. There's some men out there who they're going to take a vow never to eat again until Saul or Paul is dead. Okay, that's how determined they are. So we go to chapter 22, verse 6. Now it happened as I journeyed and came near Damascus at about noon. Suddenly a great light from heaven shone around me. And I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? So I answered, Who are you, Lord? And he said to me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting. So he is telling this to his biggest enemies. All right, this is different from him going into let's say Corinth, or going into Ephesus, or going into to Philippi, because he doesn't have any enemies. When he walks into there, he doesn't have any enemies in there. When he walks in there, he doesn't. When he walks into Jerusalem, he does. He can't step into Jerusalem without enemies, his enemies already being there. And it is interesting what he says, and we will about him being in Jerusalem, and we'll get to that. I'm not sure we'll get to it today, but maybe. All right. I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you were persecuting. All right. Verse 9. And those who were with me indeed saw the light and were afraid, but they did not hear the voice of him who spoke to me. Now we'll cover that in a bit. So I said, what shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said to me, arise and go into Damascus, and there you will be told all things which are appointed for you to do. Okay, so here is the final thing that we get from Jesus speaking to Saul on that particular occasion. But notice, go into Damascus, you're going to be told all things which are appointed for you to do. You're going to be, what must I do? Well, in chapter 9, go into the city, you'll be told what to do. Now, a little bit more, things which you are appointed to do. These are assignments that Jesus has set for Saul of Tarsus. And we have said it often. Saul can refuse. That doesn't put him in a good place at all. But Saul could always refuse. Just because it's appointed for him to do it doesn't mean he keeps that appointment. It doesn't mean that at all. He has his own will, and just like Jonah, we could say Jonah was appointed to go to Nineveh. Jonah decides, no, I'm not. And he heads on a ship heading west, heading as far west as I guess his maps would have shown. He's going a distance. He's going to Tarshish, which is ancient Spain. That's where he's headed. All right. Jonah had a will of his own. Paul has a will of his own. And so here he's told, this is what you are to do. You're going to find out more information. Now, we go to chapter 26. Chapter 26, he is recounting everything for Agrippa and Bernice. All right, and we'll just go to verse 12. While thus occupied, I journeyed to Damascus with authority and commission from the chief priests. At midday, O king, along the road I saw a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, shining around me and those who journeyed with me. So it's noon. We've already gathered that from chapter 22. He says it's midday here, at midday. And here is this shining, brighter than the sun, that's around him. Verse 14, and when we all had fallen to the ground, I heard a voice speaking to me and saying in the Hebrew language, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads. Now, we've already discussed that one. That's chapter 9, also has those words. So I said, who are you, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. Now we get more of what Jesus says. He doesn't stop there, but rise and stand on your feet, for I have appeared to you for this purpose, to make you a minister and a witness both of the things which you have seen and of the things which I will reveal to you, will yet reveal to you. Okay? So you're going to speak of the things you already know of. This would be one of them. You're going to speak of the things that you know of. And also the things that Christ will yet reveal to him. He doesn't have it yet, but he's going to. I will deliver you, verse 17, I will deliver you from the Jewish people as well as from the Gentiles to whom I now send you. Okay, so there is a specific task in mind in all of this, and that Christ says he's going to protect him. Verse 18, to open their eyes in order to turn them from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and an inheritance among those who are sanctified by faith in me. So he gives him more information of, he's sending him off to the Gentiles. But he says, I'm going to protect you from the Jews. I'm going to protect you from the Gentiles. And I'm sending you to the Gentiles. I'm sending you there. Now, once again, just because Christ says, just because he says to make you a minister and a witness, both to the things which you have seen and the things which I will yet reveal to you, just because he says, these words, to make, well, that's something that is yet to be made. Okay? That's something that there's a process for this to be done. And that means that this cannot be used to say that Saul of Tarsus had no decision on his own to make, that he couldn't make his own decisions, that he was now going to be just this little puppet of Christ, and he couldn't do, didn't have a will on his own. Yes, ma'am.
In verse 16, one of the things he said was, both of these things which thou hast seen, you will make him a witness, both of these things which thou hast seen, and of those things which I will appear unto thee. What had Paul seen?
Okay. Well, let's look with what we know Paul's already seen. Okay? He's already seen the righteous being martyred. He's already seen that. He has seen that there is no doubt in my mind that just from the events of Stephen, they saw Stephen's face like what? You remember? An angel. Yeah, okay. Not like a guilty man, not like a blasphemer, not like just your rabble in the street. He had a different demeanor about him. And Saul of Tarsus would have already seen what the true righteous look like. And he would have seen it from others. We don't even know their name. He would have seen it from others. And he even talks of Ananias. Now, one could say that this is after the fact, but he speaks of Ananias, who's in Damascus. He speaks of him as a man with a good testimony. Ananias of Damascus, not Ananias from Acts 5, who dies with Sapphira. This Ananias of Damascus, he is someone who is seen as devout, and Paul says that was, and has a good testimony. All right. Saul would have known these things. He would have known it. He would also have known the things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, though he was not a witness to those things. Okay. He was not there to see. Where was he? I don't know. I don't know where he was. We don't know where he had been. He may have been back up in Tarsus when all those events occurred. We don't know. There would be numerous reasons why one wouldn't be there. While that Saul of Tarsus wouldn't have witnessed those things, but he would have known things already concerning what is taught by Christians, because he heard Stephen's sermon. He heard that. He would already have an understanding of the things that he saw, and also what had been occurring among the Sanhedrin court and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes and the elders of the people. He would have already seen that on one side you have, I'll use the word vitriol, that's poison. They are bitter people. They are angry people. And on the other side, clearly victims. They've done no wrong. They've done no wrong. You are only after them because of what they believe, because they are following Jesus of Nazareth. That's the only reason. That's it. He would have known this already. And so Jesus is saying, you'll talk of the things that you have already seen, and also what I'm going to give you. And Paul is going to mention that he was taught by Christ. He's going to mention that. And Jesus says that's what he's going to do. That things which I will yet reveal to you. But that doesn't mean that Christ has to be sitting in front of him telling him things. How do prophets receive information? They receive it many ways. They can see things in a vision, which Paul actually will be seeing a vision of a man named Ananias coming to heal him. They see things in a vision. The words come to them by way of inspiration from God, where they now have inspired Word of God, and they now have been taught by God. When Moses writes, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and then he goes through 6 days of creation, there would be, I have no doubt, Moses would have known some of those things. I have no doubt about that. But Moses writing those things would be learning them simultaneously as he's writing them. There'd be details in there he would not know. He wouldn't know it until he's called to write it, and he writes them down. And it would be information that he simply did not know. And God did not have to be there in front of him to say, okay, this is what you're going to write. God doesn't have to do it that way. Just he reveals it. And the same thing can be true concerning any other prophet, including Saul of Tarsus. Now, we see what Christ is told directly from Christ. All right? And it's more than what we get in chapter 9. We have to look at things are a little slightly different in 22, and we get more information in 26. Now, let's go back to chapter 9. And we want to look at the men who are with him. And this is one of those things that people want to say, well, this is a contradiction. Well, it's not a contradiction. Okay? If, I realize men who write books can contradict themselves. Sure they can. They can do it. And quite often it's done. Even when it's someone who's not trying to write fiction, as the critics would say, this is fiction. Even those that aren't trying to write fiction, those that are trying to write facts down, can contradict themselves. I realize that. But this doesn't contradict itself at all. Luke writes all this, and it's being recorded. All right, so we look at this. And the men, so Acts chapter 9, verse 7. And the men who journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no one. Okay, so we go now to chapter 22. Chapter 22, and we see this. Verse 9, chapter 22, verse 9. And those who were with me indeed saw the light and were afraid, but they did not hear the voice of him who spoke to me. So over here in chapter 9, it says, hearing a voice but seeing no one. Chapter 22, it says, they did not hear the voice of him who spoke to me. All right? They saw the light, but they did not hear the voice of him who spoke to me. So one place they saw no one but heard a voice, the other they saw a light and did hear a voice. So which is it? Okay? Does this contradict? And the answer is no, it doesn't contradict. And it's as simple as this. Actually, you're going to find it in the grammar, and there are similar things like this found in the biblical text. They heard the voice. What already have we read that how did Jesus speak to Saul of Tarsus? We already read it. What language? Hebrew. Okay. Now, Saul of Tarsus is among that synagogue of the freedmen. Who are they? They are Greek-speaking Jews. Just so happens that Paul speaks both Hebrew and Greek, and but you'd have Greek-speaking Jews. It's also discussed in Acts chapter 6. Now that's Acts chapter 7. We see Stephen is one of those he too is a Greek-speaking Jew. Chapter 6, he is one of those chosen to help with the widows who are Hellenists. They speak Greek only. Okay, someone like Stephen could speak Greek, and someone like Stephen could go to the synagogue of the freedmen and speak to them because he knew Greek. It is very, very simple that in all of this, the men heard a voice, but they didn't understand it. They couldn't understand a word. And it's very possible that while he is speaking Hebrew, they don't understand Hebrew. They just speak Greek. That's all they know. So they would not have known what he said. Nevertheless, the wording in this, the wording is that they can hear a voice, but they can't understand it. You can have a whole conversation here. I remember a couple of friends I had years ago that they both grew up in Germany. They had German mothers. Both of them had German mothers, and their fathers were U.S. servicemen. Okay. When they were mad at each other, they would begin talking in German so that nobody else could understand it. Okay. And you knew they were mad when they began talking in German. And so, did you hear their voice? Yeah, I heard their voice. Did you understand? No, I didn't understand a word they said. But in this, once again, there's no contradiction whatsoever. They see no one. They see a light. They hear a voice, but they don't understand the voice. They don't understand. The message is for Saul, not for them anyway. The message is for Saul. And now, let's go to chapter 9 again. And here we have what happens next in this, because we got to go bit by bit, and we're going to each accounting if it has these details that we can look at. All right, this is what happened immediately afterward. Verse 8, Acts 9, verse 8. Then Saul arose from the ground, and when his eyes were opened, he saw no one. All right, now that's an unusual way of saying he saw nothing, because he's going to say he was blind. He's going to say that. And then when we get further into this, we're going to see, that he is blind. But he saw no one. But they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. Now, we already know he's not far from Damascus, so that journey wasn't terribly long at all. By the time he gets to Damascus, it is very possible that not only is it the same day, but we're only talking about, maybe a couple of hours. It's definitely within the same day that he is in Damascus. And verse 9, and he was 3 days without sight, there we go, and neither ate nor drank. So that's why he saw no one. He is blind. But there's 3 days he eats and he drinks nothing. He is stunned. He is mortified. He is, like we said last week, I think it was, that his worldview just changed. Everything about reality just changed. Everything. Everything that he thought to be true is not true. Or we'll just say the major things he thought to be true are not true. He thinks he's on the side of good. He's not. He's on the side of evil. While he would want to be on the side of good, he's not. And I tell you what, I've met plenty of people like that. That they think they're on the side of good. They think they're. You cannot convince them that you are very, very similar in certain ways to a Saul of Tarsus. That you talk against the very church that Christ founded and died for. You talk against that church. And at the same time, you think that you are doing righteousness. Well, you're not. You're not. You are opposed to the very thing you think you're supporting, the very thing you think you love. You are if you're against his church, you're against Christ. It's that simple. He's already said it. Now, coming back to this. So they lead him by the hand. Now, let's go to chapter 22. We go back to chapter 22, and we're just going to have to do this. Chapter 22 and verse 11. And since I could not see for the glory of that light, being led by the hand of those who were with me, I came into Damascus. So he's been blind, and he says it's from the light that glared down upon him. And it was so bright and so overwhelming that everybody hits the ground. He says everybody went to the ground. And as we asked the question last week, what else could this mean? What else could this be? Here they are midday, there's the sun, and all of a sudden a greater light is upon them from out of nowhere. Okay, what is that? What can that possibly be? And Jesus, Saul knows that whoever's speaking to him has to be someone who's not a man. Okay, he knows that. He knows that this has got to be from God. He knows it. One way or another, this is from God. Whatever's happening right now is from God. And they're just stopped dead in their tracks. Now, let's just take a moment. It's not in the text, but let's just take a moment of the men, because we don't know what happened to the men who were with him. But they would have witnessed everything he did, except they didn't understand the voice. They would know there's a voice out of nowhere. They are afraid of that. They see no one. They are down on the ground. The light shines on them as well. They see these things. They hear the voice. And now the man they're following is blind. And something really traumatic just happened to him. It's obvious. He is a changed man right there. He is a changed man. He is very, very different. Well, you would know that whatever happened had to be from God. You would know it. Even though, I don't know if he told them what was just said, because we don't know that. But they now have to lead him into Damascus. And he's going to be taken to a house of a man called Judas. And for those at home, that's not Judas Iscariot. Judas Iscariot is long dead by this point in time. That was a common name. But what happened to those men, I don't know. We simply don't know what happened to them. Did they go back to Jerusalem with the word of what happened to Saul of Tarsus? Did they go back at all? We don't know what happened to them. Obviously, they had lives after this event. They didn't die then. They had lives. What happened to them? We don't know what happened.
Did they fall to the ground too, or just?
They did, because that's exactly what Paul said. Paul said they all went to the ground. in chapter 26, verse 14, and when we all had fallen to the ground. Yeah, chapter 26 and verse 14. And then also in verse 14, we see, I heard a voice speaking to me and saying in the Hebrew language. He's speaking in Hebrew. And as we said, those men may not have understood Hebrew. They would have recognized it. If you were around a certain language for a while, you can recognize, yeah, I recognize that language as being Spanish, or I recognize that language as being French. Whoever it was speaking French. I don't know what they said. They would have, if they could have completely heard, they would have known someone was speaking to him in Hebrew. They would have known that. Now, once again, the message is for Paul only. And if you remember, there were times when God thundered, and some saying that it was his voice, some saying no, that was just thunder, and they weren't quite sure what just occurred. But here with this, the men knew there was a voice. They just couldn't understand it. They knew there was a voice. And so he is taken to Damascus. Now, we come back to chapter 9, and we see now what Ananias is told. Because Ananias, he too has to be told what to do. Because he wouldn't know that anything about this. He's got to be told that Saul of Tarsus is coming in and you are going to go see him. Okay, verse 10. So this is breaking away from the narrative concerning Paul, and now we're changing scenes, as it were. We're seeing now Ananias. Now there was a certain disciple at Damascus named Ananias, and to him the Lord said in a vision, Ananias, and he said, Here I am, Lord. So the Lord said to him, Arise and go to the street called Straight, and inquire at the house of Judas for one called Saul of Tarsus, for behold, he is praying. All right. At that very name, Saul of Tarsus, I'm sorry. At the very name, Saul of Tarsus, he knows that name. He knows that name. And he's going to say some things. He's going to say some things. But he knows that name. And he's told, all right, you're going to inquire at the house of Judas, and you're going to go to the street called Straight. Now, I don't know why, but I'm just going to make mention of this. Years ago, I was teaching a teenage class, and we talked about this, and there were some who kind of were confused and thinking, you mean they named their streets back then? Yes, that's what you do. You name your streets. If you don't, people will name them. You guaranteed. Even if you name them yourselves, you're going to say that's Aunt Marge's street. You're going to give them a name. You're going to give them a name because you got to. And evidently, this is a street, having never been to Damascus, but those that have been have told me about it. There is still Straight Street in Damascus today, and it does go right straight through town. That's what it does. And this street called Straight, in the ancient world, you have a lot of streets that zig and they zag and they curve and they going all. If you've been in ancient cities, of which I've never been in an ancient city so much. I've been in some ancient sites here in North America and also in Mexico. I've never been to an ancient site, but seeing these archaeological digs and seeing these various things, that you seldom have streets that are straight. All right, this happened to be the street that was straight and called that in Damascus. That's where he's going. Of course, Ananias, being a resident of Damascus, would know exactly where that is. And you go to the house of Judas and you inquire for Saul of Tarsus. Behold, he is praying. All right, so we already know. And he was 3 days without sight and neither ate nor drank. What else was he doing? He's praying. That's what he's doing. He's praying there. And so he evidently, he's not told what house to go to. He's just told to go into the city, which is what he was going to do anyway. Go into the city. Now, being struck blind, he might have just decided, I got to go home. He might have just decided that. But he's told, go into the city. You're going to be told what to do. Okay, so he's not told that he's got to go to the house. Saul is not told he's got to go to the house of Judas. That's where he's going anyway, no doubt in my mind. That's where he's going anyway. And so the house of Judas, they're expecting him. But they don't expect a Saul of Tarsus to be like this. He's blind? What? We weren't told he's blind. It happened on the way. Okay, that's strange. But, okay, so that's where you're going to find Saul of Tarsus. Verse 12, and in a vision, God sent Saul a vision. Already he has given Saul a vision. He has seen a man named Ananias coming in and putting his hand on him so that he might receive his sight. So from the point at which Saul gets up and is being led into Damascus and being in the home in those 3 days, sometime during that, he's given a vision from God that a man named Ananias is coming and he's going to heal you. You might receive your sight. Now here is the answer from Ananias. Then Ananias answered, Lord, I have heard many things about this man, how much harm he has done to your saints in Jerusalem. Now, his reputation has spread all the way to Damascus. Damascus is quite a travel if you're having to go by roads, it's going to be a distance from Jerusalem to Damascus, but the news has gotten there. And of course, the news is being spread through the church and also through other means of things that have been going on, and whether one was a Christian or a Jew or just a Gentile, that they would have received this information. And I'm not sure how much authority that was given from Damascus. It seems like some kind of authority allowance had to be from Damascus that would allow this foreigner to come in and take people out of the city, because that's what he's going to do. He's got to. There must be some kind of weight given from the letters of the high priest, because you can't just go wandering into this foreign city and then take prisoners out. You can't just do that. And there had to have been some kind of an arrangement that was made in that. But nevertheless. Okay, so Ananias knows who Saul of Tarsus is, and he's not so sure about this. Okay, and so we will continue next week in this. And the life of Paul does mean we have to go through various chapters looking at parallel texts, also in various books looking at parallel texts, things concerning things that happen at specific points in his life. Okay, thank you everybody, and hopefully we will continue next week.